Erlangga University. First and foremost, let me extend a warm welcome to all participants who have joined us this evening. We are delighted to have you with us for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring session. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Professor Ryo Torii from University College London, for taking the time to share this expertise with us. Professor Torii's extensive research in biomedical engineering, particularly in biomechanics and computational modeling, make him leading authority on this topic. We are indeed fortunate to have him guide us today. In today's rapidly advancing world, the intersection of engineering and healthcare is becoming increasingly significant. As biomedical engineers, we are constantly searching for innovative ways to improve patient outcomes and develop cutting-edge medical solutions. ANSYS, as many of you know, is a powerful tool that allows us to simulate, analyze, and optimize biomedical design before they ever reach a clinical setting. This workshop will provide valuable insight into leveraging ANSYS for our research and project, bringing us one step closer to impactful breakthrough in the biomedical field. This workshop is organized as part of the Campus Merdeka program under the program Kompetisi Campus Merdeka 2024 initiative, which aims to bridge the gap between academic learning and real-world industry needs. We hope this event will be both educational and inspiring for each of you. Before we begin, I encourage everyone to actively engage, ask questions, and make the most of this opportunity to learn from one of the best in the field. Once again, thank you, Prof Torii, for joining us, and thank you to all participants for being here. I wish you all a fruitful and enjoyable workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Krisno Ayin. That is for our opening remarks. And without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Ryo Torii here. He is a professor in biomechanics at the University College London, and he is actually my former lecturer in biofluids. So we will talk a lot about the CFD, I guess, in ANSYS, and all about computational modeling in ANSYS as well. So without further ado, I would like to give the screen and all the time to Professor Ryo. So the time is yours, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. And then thank you to all of you and Professor Krisno as well for inviting me to this workshop. This is my honor to be here. And then it's really a great opportunity to share my experience in biomedical research and teaching. And hopefully this will be useful for you to build things on your end as well. And also please do feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And during the presentation as well, please do feel free to interrupt me to ask questions if there's anything. And also I'm trying to set this in 2 batches. I mean, my talk in 2 batches. So some break in the middle for questions and then at the end as well. So hopefully I can deliver that in a timely fashion. But of course, yeah, please do feel free to interrupt me as well. Okay, so let me share the screen and can you see my screen now? Great. And you can hear me okay, I guess.
Yes, it's clear.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, again, so this is introduction of my let's say teaching activities as well as the research, and then hopefully that fits into your kind of direction. And then I titled this to application of computational biomechanics to medical device design and other biomedical problems. And this is quite largely based on the module I was or I am still teaching for MSc Biomaterials and Tissue Engineering, in which intern was actually a student a few years ago, and it was a pleasure teaching her. And then now it's really great to we see we are again in touch, and then yeah, this is really great, and so hopefully I can be useful to you as well in this occasion. So let me start. So so just to briefly introduce myself, so I'm a professor of biomechanics at the University College London in mechanical engineering department, and I am also serving as the head of biomechanical engineering research division in the department. So we have in the department we have about 4 main research, let's say, pillars or themes or divisions. One is biomechanical engineering, another one is energy and environment, and another one is manufacturing and materials. The fourth one is marine engineering. And these are 4 pillars we are pushing our research activities along. And I'm heading one of those, biomechanical engineering division, where probably about 20 people are primarily having activities on. And so that's what I am at the moment. And I joined actually 2012 UCL. And I came from Japan originally, University of Tokyo, and it's not here, but my undergrad was in Osaka University, and I had some time in Rice University in the US as well. Then currently I have, well, written some publications and leading a research team with luckily good funding income, and then the collaboration quite across the world, and that's really a pleasure to do actually. And then it's really nice if we could also start working together. And I also started a new company in the US based on computational modeling, and that's also sort of a new activity I'm pushing now. And that's actually thanks to the, let's say, the trend. Computational modeling is more accepted as a tool to help medical professionals. So I can hopefully tell you a bit of story around that as well. So, and then this is a website. If you're interested, you can see more sort of details of the project here. And let me move on. So by saying computational biomechanics, this is, I guess, I suppose you working in this field, so you probably know this already, but just to be sure. So by saying computational biomechanics or computational modeling in this area, what I mean is in general, we have medical images or other types of measurement, which you can see on the left side of this panel. And then we send this to computational modeling platform like ANSYS, and then computer works quite hard to get results of flow, stress, etc., which typically cannot be measured directly in vivo, such that we can get the extra information from that. So for example, this one shows a flow in ascending aorta of a patient who has a big aneurysm. And we can see because of this patient's heart valve is calcified. So we see the flow is coming as a jet and it's hitting on the wall every heartbeat. So that's giving let's say, fatigue to, well, this is our hypothesis. This is giving a fatigue to the arterial wall, which could be leading to aneurysm. So this type of quantification of physical parameter and the visualization of the flow is a big advantage. And we call this as a functional imaging tool. So integrating computational model to the existing, let's say, measurement system. And so today I'm going to introduce lots of these, and these are all mostly based on ANSYS, one of the ANSYS packages. And so if you want to know details, today I'm just skimming through the overview, but if you want to know any details, please do feel free to ask as well. And sometimes we combine this with our in-house, let's say, additional components, which is sometimes needed if we want to do a little bit more complex things. But I also wanted to put emphasis that simple analysis could still be quite useful. So that's another actually theme or topic or point I want to put emphasis today. So obviously, cardiovascular diseases is quite important, and this is a very pressing issue. So this is what I borrowed from British Heart Foundation website, where you can see lots of people are suffering from cardiovascular diseases. And that's why we do all this computational model work to help doctors and help patients to improve this. And so that this cardiovascular disease is the main thing I am focusing on in this talk and then in my research career as well. But of course, the computational model itself can be applied to any other branch of medicine and device design. For example, orthopedics, that's one of the areas people use lots of computational modeling nowadays. So today, my talk will be in this order, starting with background, so CFD analysis to tackle clinical programs, and I will move on to introduction of some details of the module I'm teaching, the biofluids and medical devices. And then computational modeling essentials, some basics, and then examples to set the scene. And then, so that's what I'm intending to be the first hour. And then in the second hour, I will be introducing more sort of case studies, specific examples, applications, to show how these technologies can be used in different areas. For example, diagnostics, treatment, device design, and some other complex cases. And at the end, I summarize the talk, and then, of course, questions and answers. That's the plan, and we'll see how it goes. So let me start with background, just to see how these CFD or computational modeling has been evolving in application to solve medical problems. So if you see this one, that's the development of application of computational modeling to medical programs in last 20 years, let's say 25 years. So you see this is 1998. I borrowed this image from Professor Charles Taylor's work, which is showing abdominal aorta in a very simple way. And obviously at this point, this was very high tech. It is still very good work, of course, but obviously, you can see the geometry is rather simple. This is idealized, which moved on. So this is one of our work in 2004, looking at the cerebral aneurysm and flows, how this is looking inside how flow is looking inside the aneurysm. And then this is probably one of the early works applying computational model to actually see what's happening in patients. And we had like 20 patients, I think, analyzed. And that's quite new, let's say, challenge at that time, because most of the analysis was done using idealized model. Then in 2012, you can find a landmark study, which is called Prediction. This is looking at the coronary artery disease progression. I think they're predicted by computational modeling. So shear stress acting on the wall, that was used as a predictor of the disease. And you can see if you combine the shear stress, which is the one of the bar graphs on the right. You can see if you combine shear stress and image-based metric, the predictability of the disease progression is much better than those image-based or shear stress alone. So that's really interesting thing to see. And this was done using about 500 patients' data. So that's one of the biggest group analysis done by research groups, even now. So that's quite landmark. And then 1 year after, same group, Professor Charlie Taylor, he actually pushed it forward to develop a clinically applicable system, which is called FFRCT. So CT, using CT and computational modeling, CFD, to predict what's the pressure in coronary artery system, and using that to calculate fractional flow reserve, which is a common metric for guiding the treatment of coronary heart disease. So this is quite a change or step forward because this system has been pushed forward as a proper clinical tool. Now, for example, in the UK, this is part of the recommended treatment guideline. And also this got the approval in the US, Europe, etc. So this is probably one of the biggest success of computational modeling to help clinical work. And I don't think they are using ANSYS, but basically, technically speaking, we can do the same thing using ANSYS, which we are actually doing, I mean, in my research group. And also to note, we had published this paper, you can see here on European Heart Journal. European Heart Journal is one of the best cardiology journals. And you can see this is expert recommendations. So that all the experts from worldwide institutions are got together to tell what is the good practice to medical professionals in order to run computational modeling. So that means the community, even the medical community, is quite keen to have this type of analysis and then how to do better or how to do it well, so that they can use this computational modeling very well in line with their research purpose. So you can see in last 20, 25 years, this has moved a lot. And then now this computational modeling can be regarded as quite an essential tool in the clinical problems. So one of the typical problems or examples I mentioned to you, which is FFR, fractional flow reserve computation. I'm just telling you a little more details. So FFR is originally proposed to guide the decision-making process of coronary heart disease. So you can see here coronary artery with the atherosclerotic plaque in the middle. This yellow bit is, so do you see my cursor as well? Or you're not seeing my cursor? Is it my cursor moving around? Do you see?
Yes, Professor, we can see
Oh,
it.
great. Thank you. So I keep using that. So, you see here the yellow thing in the middle of this vascular cartoon. That's the plaque building up. And then because of the flow stagnation or flow, let's say, limitation, because of this plaque, the pressure upstream and downstream will be much larger if the plaque is progressing and narrowing the vessel. So this parameter FFR, which is derived by dividing the distal coronary pressure by proximal coronary pressure, which goes lower when the plaque is progressing a lot and then limiting the cross-section area, and then using that to guide the decision making, ended up with so much better, this blue line here, so much better outcome in terms of the recurrent need of a major, not need of this in terms of the major adverse cardiac event after the treatment. So this parameter is really good. And then this company, HeartFlow, decided to do this simply by using computational model. So you can simulate the flow, calculate the pressure, and then you can calculate the same parameter in coronary artery, which you can see here. And to be clear, I'm not getting any money from them. I'm not really from the company, but this is simply technological explanation. And now, indeed, there are so many other companies doing similar thing based on CT or based on something else like angiogram. So you can see similar examples a lot, but these guys are the first doing this. So that's why I'm citing here. And the good thing about here is that this is simply a non-invasive alternative of existing technology, so the established indicator. So that's really important, because if you have to prove FFR itself is great indicator, then this would be really, really difficult to prove. But you know, the FFR is was already proven to be a good indicator, and then this company decided to create a alternative. So that's really a good thing for them. And then now, even looking at the solid mechanics example, you can see here another company called FIOPS. They are simulating aortic valve expansion in aorta based on patient CT, and then they're predicting the outcome, etc. So there's a solid mechanics version as well. And now you can really see those computational models are coming to help really patients and doctors. So these are some other examples, companies I mentioned, doing a fractional flow reserve, the FFR calculation. One is Medis, another is Pi Medical, HeartFlow. They are all doing this. And research level, this is the paper I mentioned earlier, using computer-derived or CFD-derived shear stress acting on the blood vessel to predict the disease progression. And there are so many other examples as well. So both research level and the diagnostic level or clinical level, computational models are used more and more. And also looking at more sort of a regulatory or the funding landscape, you can see, for example, European Commission is hosting or holding this kind of funding stream or theme in silico trials for developing, assessing biomedical products. And also you can see on the right side, this is a National Institute of Health in the US, which has also a special section on computational modeling to acknowledge or to define how this could be useful or the impact, what could be the impact. So this again tells you this is now really taking off. So that's the generic background. And now I'm moving on to the introduction of teaching module I am developing at the moment.
Excuse me, Professor. Can I have questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I also want to ask. I want to ask about I think the thing that you mentioned in the last slide about the in silico clinical trial.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about it that it's quite popular nowadays because it can represent clinical trials, but without using the patient or maybe like the only in the simulation. Can you tell me more about this?
Sorry, could you tell me again? It's in popular now running simulation without the patient's data. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Can you tell me more about this, about the in silico clinical trials?
Oh, sure. Yes, of course. So in silico clinical trials can be many different ways. So, you know, the one aspect, probably the most advanced ways you can imagine this might be happening is you create a digital twin of patient, or maybe a representative patient. So you can create a digital or computational model of a patient or group of patient, and you can administrate certain drug onto that patient or group of patients, and then response, how those patients respond to the drug, and then see whether this is effective or not. That could be the very advanced mode of clinical, in silico clinical trial. But of course, there's a big question about whether the computational model of the patient is representative enough or not. So I think it's really at the moment, I believe people are still trying to, let's say, define what can be considered good enough or what can be considered not good. So at the moment, what we are doing is to be open, say we had this assumption and that assumption, we always acknowledge this is the limitation, but at the same time, of course, we want to highlight the advantage as well. So let's say clearly define how we model these patients, and then also clarify what are the advantages and what are the limitations, and then we can make a reasonable judgment how or what can be taken out from this set of simulations or this set of virtual patients, and then we can then move on to, let's say, whatever trustworthy or reliable outcome we can take over or take home. And then, of course, the remaining things we can probably leave it for future to be improved. And then we can gradually improve everything altogether. But yeah, at the moment, so that's how things are happening, I believe. And I hope that answers your question.
And what do you think about the ethical and legal aspect of this in silico clinical trial?
Oh, that's also that's a great question. I think still under big debate. And for this point as well, what would be very important is to be open and transparent, where the data is coming from, how we process the data. And for example, if you had let's say, machine learning model, the model will be depending highly on training data. So if we can be clear about where this training data is coming from and what are the characteristics of the data, how was the data chosen, etc., then we can be fair and clear about the outcome, what might be the limitation, what might be advantage. I think that's the best thing that we can do at the moment. And I think we don't know yet a clear answer where we should draw the line.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you. Are we good to move on? If there are any other questions, I can also answer at this point. But otherwise, I could move on to the next bit, which is about our module as part of the biomaterials and tissue engineering course. So this one, what the module is called Biofluid and Medical Devices. And this is our web page, which we use. We use this system called Moodle, which you might be using. You might be using something else, but we have everything on this online site for the students to gain access. And so this is a very brief summary. So this module is part of MSc Biomaterials Tissue Engineering program, where students take I think 8 modules as a taught program of 1 year course, and then of course they take quite a big chunk of research project as another big component as well. But the 8 modules, each of them carry I think 15 credits, and that's taught throughout the year in this case. And in 1 week we have 2-hour lecture, and then that goes over 20 weeks. And we have 3 main blocks. One is fundamentals of fluid mechanics. Second block is biofluids in health and disease and application of computational modeling. That's the part I'm actually mainly teaching. And the third part is cardiac mechanics and heart-related devices. I think blood rheology as well, and some experimental measurements. So it's more focusing on, let's say, experimental aspect. And this module is tailored to students from versatile background. For example, we have mechanical engineers or other engineers, bioengineers, biologists, medics, even dentists and vets as well. So the background is quite versatile. So that's the reason why I'm teaching fundamentals of biomechanics first, such that everybody can be on the same page. And so this is assessed by a closed book exam at the end, and the coursework focusing on CFD, computational fluid dynamics, and that carries 30%. So this is actually different from when intern was a student. We changed it a little bit to make it slightly more balanced between exam and coursework, such that we can, say, continuously assess students. And so this is an example of a CFD tutorial handout we give to students. And then what we do is using ANSYS CFX, let the students experience how this computational model works and to see the blood flow in human carotid artery. So that's basically what we do. And then at the end of this course tutorial, or after this tutorial, students are assessed for the CFD coursework to simulate flows in straight pipe and mock coronary artery model, which is on the right. So this is what I borrowed from one of the students' reports. So they report on how the flow develops in a straight pipe, and then also how they see how the pressure changes across a stenosis. And then, they look into different model assumptions and how that impacts, etc., to gain a good knowledge or an experience of using computational modeling. And here, what I really want to highlight is some typical problems. So here you see an example I put on, and this is actually, some of you might have noticed that that this doesn't look right. And if you thought that, that's really true, because this is actually deliberately made wrong. So for example, here you can see, maybe I can highlight screen. No, how can I do that? Pointer options, pen. So if you look at here and there, you can see the numbers of pressure is like crazy high. Normally this should be 120 over 80, right? If you not think about the normal human pressure, blood pressure, so that's too high. Also, you're looking at the velocity. This is 68, and that's like too high. So actually, I deliberately made it wrong. Even looking at that bit, you can see the size of the vessel is like 4 meter. 4 meter is about that. So this whole vessel is about like a 12 meter, which is obviously too big. And the reason why I'm deliberately doing this and then show to a student is just to let's say, promote their awareness of mistakes, which can easily happen. And these things, without being careful, this could be overlooked. And then, yeah, you might feel completely misled. Or you may be actually completely misled by these things. These computational models don't think itself, as I'm sure you know. And then unless you are very carefully checking, this could easily happen. So I just show this to the students to tell them these could easily happen, and then they need to be very careful. And at the end, so from this coursework and some of these, let's say, provoking questions, hopefully they learn at the end how to apply the basic principles of fluid mechanics to the specific scientific understanding and modeling of fluid flow, and especially in physiological systems. And then most of the course is focusing on blood flow, but of course, same thing applies to many other things. And also you can see on the right side, we have like 3 pillars in this module. We have applications, looking at the human physiology, cardiovascular system, and then fundamental theory as a basis, one of the bases. And then the other thing is the methodological tools, computational modeling, experimental measurements, all 3 together. Hopefully the students are equipped with a good knowledge set to be able to tackle problems they want to tackle. So that's the brief summary of the teaching we are delivering. And now we can move on to the next bit, but are there any questions at this point?
Excuse me, Professor. Actually quite intriguing for me, because you mentioned that it has been changed for the score, because you said that the final test exam will be only costed like 70%.
That's correct.
The 30% will be coursework. What kind of coursework that is requested to the students so that they can balance? Because that's actually the one that is concerned, that actually my year is raised at the moment, because we are like the year after COVID, right? So it's like kind of there is this transformation that you don't need to change, something like that. So I just wondering how biofluids can be delivered in coursework, that kind of thing.
So yes, this coursework is focusing on computational modeling. So basically, we give the students tutorials, one tutorial session to tell them how to run simulations using computational model. ANSYS, TFX, and then after that, we ask the students to simulate flow. In one is in straight pipe, the other one is this idealized coronary artery model, which has got the stenosis in the middle and branching. So, and I asked them to change different, let's say, assumptions, like, could be outlet boundary condition or inflow boundary condition, or something else. And for example, because if you look at this coronary artery model, you have 2 outlets. So it could be quite different. The result could be quite different if you change the division of the flow into 2 outlets. So, the inflow could be 100% going to the main vessel and 0% side branch, which, well, that doesn't happen, but it might be 90 versus 10, or could be 50-50, and that makes a huge difference. And the question is set in a way that, okay, let's try this assumption first, and then next try another assumption, compare the results, and then see how they end up with different outcome. And then this is to tell the students why or how they have to be careful selecting different conditions when you're running simulations. As I said, the simulation software, ANSYS, doesn't think itself. So it is the operator's job, or the researcher's job, to ensure all the inputs are representative and as correct as possible. So this coursework is set in a way to promote the understanding or awareness of, to set the right kind of condition among students. So that's the goal. So we let them do things and then think about it and then discuss what would be the impact of certain changes they make. And yeah, that's the main element of coursework. So hopefully by doing these things, they can think a little bit more about the real application, rather than sitting and then answering one question in the exam. that's very brief, right? So
Yeah.
I think we separate these two elements because this type of CFD or modeling is really better learned by doing this.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of the coursework.
Okay, thank you. I think I want to
Thank
go back into the days that I'm still a student so that I can do the course rather than only 100% final exam. But thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I move on to the next part.
I have a question, Professor.
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
I was wondering, do you also teach the student about the basic of computational fluid mechanics? I mean, like the mathematical things as well before going through the cases and the tutorials?
That part, I keep it very brief. So I tell them this is based on Navier-Stokes equations, and this is based on the Navier-Stokes equation is a momentum balance, and also we tell them the mass balance or continuity equation is very important, and also I tell them some basics like boundary conditions, like no slip condition, etc. But because the students are coming from so versatile background,
Yeah.
I'm not really forcing them to deal with equations as much. So that's the line we are sort of keeping slightly away from the hardcore mathematics. It's not really hardcore, but it's a very, let's say, detailed mathematics.
Okay, because in our study program we also have one course we call it material implant design, and in this course we also use ANSYS as well, but into mechanical. We also
Mhm.
try to go to the computational fluid dynamics, but it's really hard to teach the student in the mathematical part. So I think we can adopt what you have done in your course in our course.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes, I think it's there's this balance is always difficult because sometimes the fundamentals and mathematics are very important in link with what's coming out. So I'm trying to hit the balance well enough such that they know at least some basics, but sometimes things go a bit too much for the students. So it's quite challenging always to find a good balance. Yes.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think let's then let me move on to the next part. So now I am just going through how we are going to use these things in these modeling in the device design. And here I have the brief sort of a cycle, typical process of medical device development, which is a little bit anecdotal. So it's not really like written in a book or anything, but in general, you have a problem you want to solve, and then you have the conception of the design, and then you have actual design, and then you have manufacturing and testing. And each step we can, of course, use a computational model. For example, initially you have the problem is coronary atherosclerotic disease. Let's say I'm using this as an example because this is my research area. Let's say, so even understanding the problem, we have lots of computational modeling used. But let's say we focus on the stenting now as a design program. So let's say conception as a new, let's say we want to develop a new stent. And then that I'm picking as a bioresorbable scaffold, which is the stent which is disappearing over time. And this came out probably 10, 15 years ago. And then this was very popular about 10 years ago. And then Abbott decided to withdraw from the market because the clinical trials was not that successful. But now this is coming back again. But rather than plastic, bioresorbable plastic at the time, now they are using more like a metal, like magnesium. I think. It may not be Abbott, some other companies. But let's say I'm using this bioresorbable scaffold design as an example. And so you have manufacturing testing here. You can use computational model a lot because you can create this kind of model, and you could even implant artificially in the computational vessel. And whatever finding you get from the computational model, you could feed back into the design, and then that could form a design cycle. Design, manufacturing, testing, you could do in computational world, whatever round you want to. And then after that, you could do the real world testing. But after going through the computational cycle, you can reduce the number of in vitro or in vivo development cycle quite a lot because you already know what would be good or what would be not good. You can exclude things surely don't work. And then, of course, after that, you have to go into like a trials or regulatory process, etc. But I'm just focusing on this initial stage for now. And when you now, just to tell you again, the coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, this is quite important. So I'm now following this process from the problem setting, conception, design, etc. And starting with just defining the problem. The coronary atherosclerosis, this is a big problem, big healthcare burden. We are talking about this vessel feeding the heart itself, the myocardium, and then about 12% of the death. This is a little bit old statistics, but it's still quite large portion of mortality. And the healthcare burden financially, and also number of patients is massive. So this is a big problem. And the reason why we think computational model can be useful in understanding of atherosclerosis is, of course, there are lots of biomedical or biological evidences showing how these shear stress acting on the endothelial cell lining of the vessel can be serving as a trigger to the biological system to promote the response of the vessel wall, and sometimes it goes in a maladaptive direction to accumulate the fat deposited in the vessel wall, which is now narrowing the lumen area, which is limiting the flow. And as I mentioned, the use of shear stress is quite highly explored by lots of researchers, including ourselves, to predict the disease progression. So that's one of the basic problems. And when it comes to the diagnosis, there are lots of simple-ish methods. For example, to look at the vascular narrowing in images, which is obviously the simplest way, but later on, this is not the only way to assess the vessel, or in other words, even the narrow vessel sometimes is okay in terms of its function. So then functional tests came up afterwards, for example, using PET to see the flow directly to the myocardial muscle, or this FFR parameter I mentioned earlier, again, assessing functional aspect of the vessel rather than only anatomical aspect. And this non-invasive version of this FFR came out as well afterwards. So when it comes to treatment, what happens is, as you probably know, most of these cases are treated by stenting. So inserting catheter, open balloon, leaving a stent at the narrowing, which is very standard. Now, if there are like a multiple atherosclerotic lesions, etc., then in the complex cases, often bypass grafts are used to treat that. But this is very small portion nowadays. And even stenting is done. Stenting is very successful nowadays. So there are not too many programs percentage-wise. It's actually 90% successful, roughly speaking. So, if you just look at the percentage success, that's really good. But of course, every year, about 100,000 stents are placed in patients, even in the UK alone. That means 10% of that is 10,000. So that the absolute number is massive. So we still have a problem to solve. And indeed, when we look at typical stent issues like thrombosis, fracture, and restenosis, each of them have like 1 to 10% of the rate. And so that all totals about like 10% of problems happening to patients. And again, these are largely related to flow. So that's why we think CFD or flow modeling is very useful, because it's really difficult to get the flow, understanding the flow inside the actual patients. So when we come to the problem of bioresorbable scaffold, what we see now, let's say one of the trials people made to address this problem is a bioresorbable scaffold, because if you use a metallic stent, that stays forever in patient's body, whilst if you use a bioresorbable scaffold, it goes away in like 2-3 years. So that is looking very promising. And when you look at that, obviously the bioresorbable scaffold in the first trials are or polymer, and that means the polymer's Young's modulus is much smaller than metal, and that means the strut or stent has to be bulkier, and that is known to be disturbing the flow more. And basically, is it good enough? And one thing we did is to assess how much of the flow disturbance caused by this bigger strut or bigger stent. So you can see this box in flow, placed in a flow. This is one of our works. And this is super simple 2D simulation. And on top row, you can see bigger stent strut. The bottom row, you can see smaller stent strut. And then this right panel, it's called malapose, is a stent placed a little bit away from arterial wall. So that happens quite often when stent is placed. And then you can see below, when the malapose strut is big, this disturbs flow a lot. So this could be quite not great to the flow of the patients. And this is related to the elevated disturbance is related to thrombosis in the stent. So that is actually suggesting these bulky stents may be a problem when this is not optimally placed in the patients. So this is one of the things we used, one of the examples, we used computational modeling to assess or help the stent design. And also this is to evaluate a stent using a circular cross-section. So this is Mirage stent, is a new stent that has got the circular cross-section, which is supposed to be letting the flow going through more smoothly. So you can see this is actually not the purely computational model, but this is what's actually implanted in animal. And then we got the images of these vessels and created a computational model, run simulation to understand how the flow is going over the struts, and then which actually showed a better profile in terms of the shear stress for this new stent. So this is another way to use computational model to help designing the new device. So trying, although this is combination of computational model and animal model, but this can be done purely computational model as well. And this is could be part of the design process to evaluate the impact of new design. So just to summarize things, so computational modeling can be used as part of design process to highlight the impact of design alteration, and effective application requires a good understanding of the problem and the choice of adequate approach. So I'm highlighting this here because I'm going to explain in next few slides what are the approaches available. And now I'm aware about the time, so this is one from the beginning. So let's say, let me go through a few more slides, and then I'll stop for a moment to ask if there are any questions. Okay, so now when we look at different types of computational modeling, this is actually things we do in my research group. So medical device and image analysis, fluid mechanics, solid mechanics, and some geometry modeling and biological system simulation as well. So basically you can model anything as long as you know equations to, let's say, for the governing equation for the system. And then we could also look at the different types of computational modeling based on complexity. So typically, we have to ask questions ourselves when we are starting new simulation, like what are the spatial dimensions, 0D, 1D, 3D, 2D or 3D, steady or transient, is it changing over time or not, how to model blood, this is non-Newtonian, and should compliance be considered, and what kind of physical biological system to be included. That's the key. That's more sort of a overall question. And what type of mesh should be used? That's more sort of typical practical question. All these questions, and you have lots of options. And for example, you can combine different physical systems when you are simulating stent, which is releasing some drug. This is called drug-eluting stent. You may know that already. You could combine geometry, fluid mechanics, mass transport all together. If you want to simulate atherosclerosis disease progression, actually in computation, then you may combine all these things, including biology. So all combination can be achieved. Again, if you know the system very well. So careful consideration is needed anyways to model assumptions and its validity. That's always true. But then based on that, you choose different, say, granularity of the model. So for example, this is a so-called 0D model using electric circuit to represent human circulation, and where you can simulate flow in quite wide range of human body circulation. And this is one of our PhD students' work, resistance, compliance, and inertance of the vessel can be approximated by electric circuit components. And this is the area of circulation, and computation goes relatively fast. And you could do this in 1D, which is using 1D version of Navier-Stokes equation. This is axisymmetric. And then you can see, for example, if you simulate the lung vasculature using 1D model, you can simulate waves propagating in the system. And then if you compare, this is again my student's work, if you compare 0D and 1D, there are some differences, but difference is relatively minor. So you may stick to 0D or you may go to 1D, depends on the details of the model you want to get. And then you could go to 2D, which is, so this is an example of the core shell structure fabrication. This is a sort of micro pipette producing this bubbles structure, like a double layer bubble structure, which is modeled. This is looking like 3D, but this was actually modeled using this axisymmetric setting. So nozzle shown here, and then this part is the area after the injection. And you can simulate this in 2D such that this goes fast enough, but you can still see nice representation. And then, oops, this is a 3D. You already, I'm sure you know that very well. And this is David Steinman's group's movie. Maybe this is one of the most viewed three-dimensional flow visualization animation in the world, because everybody uses this as an example. But of course, you can see how complex the flow going through the carotid artery bifurcation here. And this is really good example of the 3D. So you see all these different types of flows and options to be able to simulate. Even, you can say flow simulation can be quite different. And apart from this one, all can be done using ANSYS packages. So not this one either, but this one I did using ANSYS Fluent. This one, I'm sure we can do this Fluent or CFX. And for that, in any case, it's really important to make the meshing right. I guess you already know this pretty well. So you have different types of mesh and different combination of the mesh, and the resolution is really important. But of course, the mesh size and adaptability to the geometry is really important. So the tetrahedral mesh is really good, fitting to different complex geometry, but may not be computationally efficient, whilst the hexa may be good for efficiency, although the adaptability to the geometry is not great. And prism layer to enhance the resolution near the wall, that's a typical way. And this is one thing I tell my students often, the resolution of mesh has to be chosen very carefully because that's the real life analogy. So obviously if you make the pixel size bigger for the digital photograph, then you keep losing all the details, and then that's not really great. If you want to understand this is Einstein, probably you need this level of details at least, and then that's the important message I always tell the students. And of course, the validation is very, very important too, to compare this with any trusted, independent, either measurement or theoretical analysis result to be able to ensure your computational model is representative. And so that's very briefly speaking, going through options to model flow or any physical systems, and careful choice of right approach in line with the nature of the problem. So knowing the nature of the problem is also very, very important, but the nature of the problem carries the utmost importance. So this is really important message I tell students. I'm sure you are already aware, but I just wanted to be sure everybody's on the same page. And so that's, let's say, probably end of the first chunk I wanted to deliver. So how should we do this now? Should I take questions, or do you want to have a break? I don't mind just carrying on.
I think we will. I will ask the participants first whether are there any questions to be raised for Professor Torii. I know it's quite taken aback for hearing so much insightful presentation from Professor Torii, especially for the modeling and all the mathematics and the simulation in progress. So do you have any question? I guess there is one here in our chat box, Professor. So senior lecturer as well, Mr. Akif asked whether to learn computational modeling in biomaterial engineering, how much mathematical knowledge should students have? I think it's a very fundamental question that maybe the follow-up question from Mr. Alvian as well. So how do you think, Professor, because you have been in this expertise and in this field for quite some time, and I see that there are a lot of mathematicals in your lectures. So how is it?
Sure. So that's a very important question, I think, and then this is a very difficult question as well for myself too, because I come from computational modeling background. So I actually wrote my own finite element code for my PhD. So I'd say I know things inside out Maybe not as much as now, not really the up-to-date technologies, but at least I know some good basics. And so from my point of view, ideally, yes, any users, I'd like users to know good fundamentals. But at the same time, now this tool is becoming so common. And I'm going to tell you some example later that we of running computational model in a very easy way for or by medical doctors. So young medical doctors now run simulations by inputting some key numbers and pressing buttons, and it runs quite easily. And then this is happening anyways. So my let's say, I wouldn't say compromise, but my balancing point is to make sure they understand the very key parts. So for example, the boundary conditions. If, like I said to you, if you change the boundary condition, how the flow splits to two branches, this could change the result a lot. And also inflow condition, if you change the inflow condition, this could change the result. I really want to ensure the meshing is good quality. And these three are the very, very basic stuffs I really ensure the users understand. And this is actually not mathematics, but let's say some principles. And to be honest, the mathematics, it's okay. You don't have to know. Because let's say when you're using MRI or CT, we don't know any basics, mathematical basics of things, right? Or ultrasound. And I mean, you may know some, and some of you know probably pretty well, but I certainly don't know the bottom of MRI physics, but I still use MRI. So, that's the same story probably. It's the more the tool becomes common, the more like wider people use this tool, and then it's difficult. So yeah, the bottom line is, I think it's okay not knowing the details of mathematics, but I would also say, at least as a teaching component, I would say to try to tell the students at least some basics. And for example, in 3D simulations, you use Navier-Stokes equation to solve the flow. And because the Navier-Stokes equations is looking at the pressure difference rather than pressure itself. So it's important you look at, the outflow boundary condition, even if you say the pressure to be 0 at the outlet or pressure to be 100 at the outlet, the result is just simply elevated by 100 or 100 everything below. That's the outcome you get. So and the reason why you get that is based on the fact that Navier-Stokes equations is taking the difference of pressure rather than the pressure absolute. So that kind of like fundamentals, which is related to practical aspect, is probably something you can teach the students. But all the super high level details is not necessary, I would say. So that's where I am drawing the line. Of course, depending on who I am teaching to as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers question. I hope it does.
Okay. Is there any follow-up question, especially for Pak Akif? Is that good enough? Or any follow-up question for other participants as well? We are welcome. So basically, for maybe the follow-up question will be coming from me. So for the boundary condition that you mentioned before, so it's actually can I say that it can be coming from the condition itself. I mean, like, what are the case? Is the case is aneurysm, or other than that, it will affect the anatomy of the vessel, right? So here the modeling will still need this mathematical model for us to be able to input it in the ANSYS itself or in the simulation itself. So I'm still wondering, like, how we can, like, combine the anatomical thing and also combine with the mathematical so that we can input it in this simulation. Or we can simply, just you mentioned before, like the junior doctor can, input some number and press some buttons to actually run the simulations.
So yeah, perhaps I can tell you some examples. And so in case we have everything measured, we do not need any mathematical models. I mean, mathematical models still the example I told you about the junior doctor running simulation, those ones, we have all the data. So we have the inflow velocity from measurement. And so they can actually simply type in the number, and then we can run the simulation. And so this is a very simple case. Some other case, for example, this FFR CT, the doctors only have CT. So they have to assume how to calculate the inflow to particular patient, how much of the flow goes out from different branches. So these ones require some mathematical equations to be able to define the boundary conditions. So it also depends on the data you have. And then, if you have perfect data of the patient, then, I mean, scanning everything and you get all the numbers from here and there in there, you don't need much mathematics to define the model.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so if not, then there are some generic. There's experimental work published some years ago. The flow and the diameter of the vessel in coronary arteries. So, for example, you can use that as a generic condition to estimate how much of flow goes into this branch and that branch, which I sometimes use in our model.
All right, thank you, Professor. And there's appreciation from Pak Akif as well. He's also my former lecturer in my bachelor study, so it's quite surreal to having, like 2 lectures of my 2 studies journey come all together in one Zoom. All right, thank you. Any other question from the audience? So do you want to continue with the next session, or should we grab some water or coffee before we go further? How do you think, Professor?
So for me, I'm happy either way. I can carry on, or yeah, it's fine either way. If you want to, because it's already 20 past.
Oh yeah, okay. Time flies in Egypt. All right.
Yeah, right. I mean, for me, it's okay. I have some extra time, so I'm happy to stay on, but yeah, it's more like up to you.
Okay, I think we can proceed for a further session. Yeah, you can have the next session right after.
So I start. So you mean I just continue on?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
I carry on then. So let's go to the next part. So now I go into some examples, case studies, to show you how these things could be used. So the first thing is the diagnostic example. So I mentioned to you already the shear stress acting on the vessel wall, particularly the endothelial cells, and how they respond relates to how the disease could progress, which means the shear stress could be used as a predictor of the disease in coronary heart disease. And this one, just to tell you, the normal shear stress is considered to be between 1 and 7 Pascal. And what we are interested is the shear stress going too low, which is suspected to be a triggering factor of atherosclerosis. So here I already mentioned about the FFR example. Sorry, I'm jumping a little bit, but now I'm going to explain how we might be using this computational model to actually help doctors. So it's more like a study design question. And so here, this one I showed you already the trial, which involved 1,005 patients to prove the efficacy of this FFR when deciding or decision making of the stenting. And now, just imagine we run simulation of 1,005 patients, and also knowing this is the typical process of computational model. So medical imaging to start with, anatomical model creation, meshing, problem setup, solution, and post-processing. And that takes about like 30 minutes or a few days if this is complex. And now the question is, do we want to spend like 2 years to analyze 1,000 patients, which could be possible, but maybe not very practical. So what we did, also what we looked at is the number of patients. So this study, prediction study, which looked at 506 patients, which is done using relatively simple analysis condition, which is assuming steady flow, although the flow in the human circulation is pulsing. And this next one is a half flows trial, which had 250 patients. So this used actually pulsatile flow, a little bit more complex, but half of the number of patients. And I'm actually putting horizontal axis as a complexity of the model, and then vertical axis as a number of patients in like a logarithmic manner. So many of bioengineering studies are having like single-digit patients. So that's very low here, but high complexity, that's a typical thing we see. And this also means the time required for each analysis is like simple one, less than 30 minutes, and intermediate one, maybe half a day, 1 day, and high complexity analysis takes like longer than a day, or even few days or 1 week. So now like this one, or we actually increase this to like about 300, and which still takes time. And when we look at the flow assumption, that's quite a big division, steady flow or pulsatile flow. And actually this prediction study showed quite interesting indication. So steady flow could still be useful, but in any case, what's important, we think, is to make it running fast. And we created this interface to run the simulation faster, simpler by a medical doctor. So this one panel does everything. So the doctors input numbers and then keep pressing buttons, then we actually get the simulation results. This is done with one of the hospitals in London. And so this minimizes human input and standardized meshing to post-processing, and analysis time is reduced to about 20 minutes per vessel. So by this, a young medical doctor or young medical fellows can conduct analysis. And thanks to that, we have a study conducted using about 300 patients in about 6 months. So that's quite fast. And then that was reasonably well received as well in the publication. And so this is one of the things we did quite, let's say, intensively in these years, such that we set the platform and then we can run lots of studies now. So even in this case, we assumed inflow to be steady, but even a simple analysis can be useful if it's placed in the right context. So because this is to predict disease to cause the catastrophic events, and that's quite useful thing to do. And also, when you look at other things, other comparisons, you can see how to set the number of patients in a, let's say, clever way. So, I said by doing this, we managed to increase the number of patients and analyzable within reasonably short time frame. And even in a little bit more complex case, these guys like heart flow, they have done clinical trial with only 254 patients, not like 1,000. This is because they actually set the comparison to be not worse than the existing invasive measurement. So by saying that, even 254 patients actually proves the efficacy of this new approach. What I mean is the comparative target, the invasive fractional flow reserve they targeted has already been proven as a good indicator. So if you say, oh, my new method deriving the same metric is actually not worse than that, saying my new approach is actually good enough to be used. So that's their logic, and this is quite clever, and this kind of consideration could be quite important when applying computational model to clinical problems. And so now looking at the complexity of the model and the number of patients, ideally, what we want to do is we want to just to increase the complexity, increase the number of patients, then we have good, perfect simulations for many of the patients. But of course, that's not quite possible because it takes too long. And so this is just a bit of additional thing. It's not really ANSYS, but just to introduce a new things as a topic. What we are doing now is to make it faster using machine learning. So what we are doing is using these examples we simulated, thrown into machine learning algorithm to actually predict it using deep learning model, such that we can actually see the prediction of shear stress, which is reasonably good. So if you look at the left panel, the very left one is the original CFD analysis. The middle one is the prediction by deep learning model. And this is fairly good prediction. And this is actually done in 1 second. So this even make it faster, although the accuracy would be lower than the original one. But that could be a good compromise. So when you're coming to, for example, this catheter laboratory or patient coming to a clinic, you may see doctor pressing just a button and you get this shear stress value, which could be happening in some years. And I know lots of other people are trying to do this. So this could happen quite soon, I would say. So that's one of the examples I wanted to show you. And so towards the diagnostic options. And so the first part is actually using ANSYS, the CFD part by doctors. So I created the interface to let the process of CFD, instead of ANSYS Workbench, it actually is simpler by doctors. So that's something I can probably highlight. Okay, so the next example I am showing is a treatment. So the first one was prediction, but this one is more related to medical device. The device, not developing medical device, but I'm showing an example to optimize the existing device, the use of existing device. And here what I'm interested is the left ventricular assist device. So here, this is a patient's CT of aorta and ventricle. And then we have, this patient actually had the LVAD, HeartMate 2, implanted. And what we did is to combine 0D model of the entire circulation, but actually this is simpler version, but electric circuit model of circulation combined with 3D model. So create this electric circuit or lumped parameter of 0D model gives us a boundary condition to be used in this 3D model. And by combining this, we can actually see flow in 3D with and without the ventricular assist device on and off. Of course, in the patient, we cannot say, oh, can you switch off the ventricular assist device? Because obviously that's going to be a big trouble for the patient. But on the computational model, we can do that. And the reason why we wanted to do this is there are different ways to control the device. It's quite experimental because a ventricular assist device is a centrifugal pump essentially. So it keeps running at the same speed. And the flow in human body is pulsing. So although this device is very well established, we still don't know what's the impact of the pulsation or lack of pulsation of the device. So by using this, we wanted to explore what will be the impact if we manage to make the assist device pulsing. So for example, this is artificially increased and decreased the rotational speed of the vessel, and we can see how the flow might be different. So this is a simulation using something we call virtual contrast agent. So initially, the vessel is filled by 100% filled by this contrast agent, and then that's why you see this in black. And then by the time this is cleared away, and if you see with and without artificial pulse, you can see the clearance of the flow per certain time is a bit different. So if you look at it for like a long time, this could be quite different. So that means that this artificial pulse, like an artificial up and down of the speed, could be quite effectively clearing up the flow through the system. And this type of thing can be used for any other type of operation of LVAD, even simply raising the rotational speed or lowering the rotational speed or pulsing anything. So this can be a good use of another good use example of CFD in order to optimize the operation of the device. And furthermore, to just push forward, we explored further use of the a bit more complex case. I'm just briefly touching on this to say we wanted to see how the efficacy of the drug treatment would be similar or different for a patient. And then this is a patient having a LVAD and also aortic insufficiency, which is the leakage of the heart valve. So this is the patient. So, and then we have simulated hypothetical simulations, how we change drug delivery to the pulmonary artery of the patient, which ends up with different scenarios. I'm not going to tell too much of details, but this actually indicates certain ways of treatment is more useful than others. So that's basically, let's say, the message from here. And we also look at talking about the pulmonary artery. We also look at the creation of virtual patients to understand pulmonary artery disease patients. But this one is actually not quite ANSYS. So I'm just using this as an example of some other cases. But basically, we generated 1,000 patients using 0D electric circuit model, because this pulmonary hypertension is a rather rare disease, and it's not really common to get the patient's data. So what's useful here is we generate 1,000 patients virtually. They don't exist, but we actually change the parameters within practically possible range. so that we can actually administrate drug to these virtual patients. So this is treated by vasodilator. So this we can actually administrate, give the drug to this virtual patient and see what happens. So for example, in some cases, it works very well. In some other cases, it doesn't work well, but we can see where the threshold is and how those different, let's say, different anatomical patterns are related to the efficacy of the drug, so such that we can understand better. So sometimes, patients respond well to certain patients respond well to a drug. Some patients don't respond. So we wanted to sort of categorize who are responding well, who are not responding well by using these virtual patients. Okay, so that's another example. But now let me introduce some additional case of device design. This is probably more closer to your interest. So let me start this with a little bit non-flow dynamics example. And this is a design of a device, design of new device, which is to measure force given by a cell culture system, cell culture construct. So what they do is in this middle part, my collaborator in tissue engineering, let's say group, they are developing, let's say, artificial muscle. So they create a tissue engineered artificial muscle here, and then they want to measure the force given by this artificial muscle. And then this device is basically to monitor how much of the force is given by that artificial muscle over time. So what we're expecting is over the time, the artificial muscle contracts more, and then the force is increasing. And then this beam, maybe I can go to the next section. So this beam is actually looking like this. And then the beam is bent if the force is given. And then this beam is acting as a sensor. So the more force is given, the beam is more bent. So, you can measure using these strain gauges attached on the beam. So you keep measuring the strain on the beam, which is the indication of how much the beam is bent. And then using this equation, we can actually link how much of the strain measured by that sensor to the force given to this beam. So the key thing is, if you make the beam very stiff, then it doesn't bend much by the force. And then because the force given by this artificial muscle is very tiny, so we want to make this beam thin such that this beam, a force transducer, is becoming much more sensitive. But if we make it too thin, then it like flops down. So we don't want that. So we have a design question which has got multiple parameters. So in this equation, so the L is the length of the beam, B and T are the width and the thickness of the beam. So by changing these parameters, we can actually find how we can make the sensitivity better, but not making it too weak. So even this kind of simple equation as a model could be very useful to help us design things. So this is an example. So this is actually one of our student projects, like a third-year student designed this, and then he did really good job to do this. So this kind of thing is, I wanted to bring this up to show you a simple equation or analytical, let's say, work or model to design something. So a more, let's say, practical example you can see here. This is a completely different thing, but bioresorbable scaffold, which I mentioned earlier. So, and also if you remember, the bioresorbable stent is disappearing over time, which means this is becoming thinner and thinner over time. And what was done here is to look at how the stent is becoming thinner and thinner, and how the stress given by the blood pressure is increasing. So you can see this red line. So this plot is showing things changing over a month. So we created this model of bioresorbable scaffold at different times of the along the dissolution process. And we just assume, based on some experimental study, that how much of size change happens over time. So after 4 months, this becomes like 80% of the initial size. After 8 months, this is 66%. After 12 months, this is 53%. And we simulated the stress in the stent. And that is shown here by this red line. And then you can also see how the tensile strengths change over time. So if you look at that, after 6 months, the tensile strengths, the stress in the stent is going more than or crossing over the tensile strengths, which means after 6 months, probably stent is broken by the pressure, given blood pressure. And then by the time the stent is probably embedded in the vessel wall, swallowed in the vessel wall. So even this is broken, it's probably okay. But, you can use this kind of computation by adjusting the thickness of the stent, and also in combination with the flow analysis I showed you earlier. So all these modeling process can be combined together to find the best stent size such that the patient gets the maximum benefit. That's another example. Computational mechanics or modeling is used to assist design, could be used. And of course, talking about the stent, we could simulate a deployment process. So this is a deployment simulation I ran some time ago, and it's deployed in the vessel wall in a very simple way. And this was done using LS Dyna, which is now part of ANSYS. And for example, you can change the thickness of the vessel or thickness of the stent or design of the stent. All these things can be adjusted according to the design requirement. And once the stent is placed in, what could also be done is to look at how the stent may be moved around or bent by the heartbeat. So this is one of the examples of stent implanted in patient. And then we have this angiogram changing over time to be able to find out. So this is a stented segment. And then you can see how this stent center line is moving around over time. And then we can incorporate this motion to this vessel model. And then, for example, simulate how the stent or vessel is stressed. Stent as well as vessel is stressed by the motion of the heart. So for example, if you look at that, this stent is colored by the level of stress on the vessel wall as well. So you see some of these spots of high stress, which is basically stress pressed by the corner of the stent. And then also the stents have some parts like yellow and red, which is like high stress parts. And then you can see some spots also in the wall, high stress. And if you look at the stent material, this is alloy, the cobalt chromium alloy, which has got the EU stress of 500 megapascal. And here, actually 500 megapascal is a yellow. So yellow is, you can be seen here and there. So these bits, maybe there's a plastic hinge forming. So this is another kind of analysis. And then of course, once you know that, then you can think about change of the design and alteration. And so yeah, these bits could be at the risk of fracture. And so that's an example of device design and we might be able to benefit from computational model. And then the last bit, I show you a couple of examples of a bit more complex cases. And then hopefully that's going to give quite comprehensive view of computational model. So now the first example I'm showing you is this is our recent study to look at super high resolution heart, this is not simulation, but we actually go to synchrotron, a high power X-ray facility, to be able to get extremely high resolution image of the heart. So you can see here, this is something called cinematic rendering of X-ray imaging, and this looks quite realistic, but this is actually reconstructed from X-ray imaging. So you see the heart and then all the vessels, and the vessels some parts are squashed because this is actually explanted tissue, donated a heart by a patient. But we can see quite nice structure inside, including muscle directions, muscle fiber directions, etc. And this is really great source of information for us to do a better modeling approach. So, I showed you some examples already, but imaging combined, we can get a lot more sort of higher fidelity computation. So not only computational model technology advancement, we can also benefit from imaging modality advancement. And again, I'm using a stent case as another complex model case. But here, for example, if you want to know how the thrombosis might be occurring, you can actually let particles go through this and see how each of the particles might be experiencing things. So how many particles are staying where. So you can say, if you look at this bit, this is each particle's residence time computed. So the residence time, high residence time, meaning these particles are staying in this vessel for a long time. And these particles are representing either red cell or platelet. So if the platelet is activated and staying in the vessel a long time, this could be the trigger of thrombosis. So that's one complex example we can run. And of course, this is computationally very expensive. So we can't really run this for like 100 vessels, but it's quite a nice indicative complex analysis. And this is another complex case. We try to combine finite element analysis, solid mechanics simulation with a cellular model. So we can see these little bits representing cell or group of cell interacting with the vascular model. So each of them has a location and orientation. And this is actually the one I mentioned earlier, the artificial muscle creation process. And then you can see as time goes, those cells are more aligned and then getting together to produce larger amount of force, and which is produced or captured by a computational model. So this kind of a combination of biology into computational model is another direction we are heading in the future. And the most complex example you can see is like a whole heart simulation by different groups. Like this is University of Auckland, King's College. This is the University of Tokyo. This is the EPFL. All these groups are doing super complex simulations, including the heart muscle contraction, fluid mechanics, solid mechanics, and even like some genetics stuffs. So you could go super high fidelity or complex simulation. But now I want to, and maybe I can go here just to go through the other examples. But one thing I want to remind you is that the more complex, the longer time you need to wait. So want to probably I recommend you or everybody. Also, I'm telling this to students to be careful to set the complexity level just about right for your program. Because if you do something too complex for the program, relatively simple program you may be having, then you'll be spending too much time to get the answer. So to find the balance between the problem's complexity and the method's complexity, get them in line quite nicely is important. And the last bits I want to explain is just to show you some other examples. So we do have the micro size bioprinting simulation in collaboration with some colleagues in the department. These are 3D printing simulation we are running, like for example, the impact of different nozzle size. And also we have simulation. This is actually another design question. This colleague, Stephen, he's developing a new stirrer in the lab. And we created the model of new stirrer, how better this mixes the solution. And this clearly shows that the new stirrer, as you can probably imagine, mixes things so much better. And last thing I'm showing is we are running a big project now to see how the flow goes around in hospital spaces. So with UCL hospital just next to our department. So we see if the COVID patient is in this ward or room, how this potentially COVID-laden, virus-laden aerosol may be going around in the hospital section. So that's another thing we are trying to do. Actually, we are doing that right now in collaboration with the hospital. So it's not quite design of device, but could be related to design of the room or space. So that's like actually in the similar context. And so that's all I wanted to tell you. And just about right. To summarize, the computational modeling is now quite an effective tool in biomedicine, including device development. And careful choice of modeling approach is, of course, quite important. And to set the right question is even more important. A new teaching module may put strong emphasis on the balance between the technical and contextual elements. And for example, how you can define better hemodynamics. You know, when you look at the stent, we can run simulation and we can compare different cases, but it's also important to know what is better, what is worse in terms of the blood flow. So this background information is also very, very important to be able to make a good judgment. And more applications are emerging, so you can clearly see in terms of the trend, we are using, or doctors are using more of the computational models. And it's surely a promising topic to teach. And of course, I continue to be teaching. And of course, in case you're developing new module, and then if you need any help, please feel free to let me know. And the really last thing I wanted to highlight is actually this, I think next week, it happens to be the week of UCL delegates visiting Indonesia. So I know there's a UCL's alumni event in Jakarta, and also there's a career fair. Maybe obviously this is in Surabaya as well. I think this is close to you, right? So if you're interested, please let me know. I can forward you some details. I think there's a stand of UCL in this career fair. And another thing is we have this global engagement fund at UCL, which is given to collaboration between UCL and any sort of a global partners. And we have you on the right side, you can see in our divisions expertise, quite wide range of expertise, cancer, cardiovascular, ultrasound, or manufacturing, and orthopedics and sensing robotics. And we have all these things. And in case you're interested in doing something together, please let us know. We can think about applying for this engagement fund as a start, and then to increase the activity level. That's surely possible. So that's the end of my thing. And let me say at the end, thank you to you, all of you again, for listening quite a long time. And then I'm very happy to take any questions you might be having.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear my voice clear? Because it's
Yes.
a bit troubled here with the connection. Is everything clear? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Torii. And it's quite a good news that we'll have an event in Surabaya as well. Hello? Is it all right?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh. I'm still lagging. Hello?
Hi, I can hear you.
Is it all right? Check.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have no idea. It's a bit troubled. All right. So I think we have one question here, and I actually very interested in having a connection with UCL as well. I mean, I am planning to go to Jakarta for the 3rd of November, but I don't think that my works can be, can be lifted if I go to the Jakarta because it's quite far. But fortunately, UCL have this event in Surabaya, so I think I would really love to come. Okay, so we have one question here in the chat box, Professor.
Yes,
It's
I can
coming
see
from
that.
our senior lecturer as well.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's good for the signal. Hello.
I can hear you.
Oh, wait. Yeah, maybe you can read
Yeah,
the
maybe I can read it out and then answer the question. So the
Sure.
question is, in the era of in silico trials, the reliability of a numerical model must be proven through the comparison with experiments. Yes, I agree. As in the previous case, a lot of effort was spent in the preparation and validation of the realistic folded balloon model, which might be not necessary when the interest is in the mechanical performance of the stent. Indeed, it must be considered that usually the purpose of the stent simulation is to predict its behavior when implanted in the artery. Yes, therefore, in silico model of a balloon expanded coronary stent has to be able to take into account those aspects influencing the stent capability of maintaining open a stenotic artery, such as the residual stress included, yes, during the crimping procedure and the radial stiffness, how to make validation of excellent mimicking. Oh, that's excellent question. I think it's really difficult, I have to say. But I could totally agree. It's good to have all the process in the simulation considered, if possible. That's another big question, actually. So, for example, I showed you here stent simulation given by only by the bending of the vessel. And here I did not include the residual stress or plastic hinge already formed by the crimping and expansion process. So, and indeed, if you look at the car, I think, models, I read some articles automobile models. I actually read some articles saying if you simulate all the process of the manufacturing and then put that in the car model and then to run the crash testing on the computer model, actually the result is different from, let's say, the pristine AI model. So, the defects or residual stress coming from the manufacturing process actually affects the results. So in a let's say, ideal scenario, I do agree that it has to be done. And one potential thing we could use to validate this is to use photoelasticity. So, if you look at the photoelasticity approaches to simulate, sorry, not simulate, to visualize the stress distribution, although this has to be in transparent material, you could actually validate the residual stress even after the balloon expandable coronary stent. But of course, the material choice is not easy because I don't think there's any transparent metal. So it would probably need to be done by plastic. And it's not really exactly the same as a metallic stent. So the best thing, another thing we could do is either using some sort of a CT X-ray oriented based methods to capture the microstructure of the metal or something alternative. So I suppose this would be possible, but this is probably quite challenging and maybe there's no perfect solution. So I think we pursue this. Important thing is we pursue this and then to find out what's the best thing we can do. And at the same time, this is another thing I'm arguing a lot with my clinical colleagues. So another testing may be to compare the result as we have with the clinical results. So if whatever we do now is indicative of clinical outcome, and if we do this analysis always consistently, my colleagues say, well, that's probably something useful. This may not be something accurate. Accurate as in, it should be accurate to a certain extent, but this may not be 100% accurate or 90% accurate, but this is indicative enough for the answer we are looking for. If that's the case, this is still useful. And then, acknowledging the limitation, but taking the advantage of something useful is another thing, engineers often do, because we are always looking for approximate solution, but the practical solution. So that's another approach. I think it's important we pursue both ways, the practicality and the accuracy. So that's my answer to your question. I hope that answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Torii. So we must integrate all the modality of assay concerning of characteristic of the organ or part of body which we try to mimicking, and always consider all the alteration happens in our body. Is it right?
So again, I think it's ideal scenario. We need to do that, but that's probably not quite possible to include everything. And then the famous quote is there's a famous quote saying all the models are wrong, but some are useful. So this is, I think, very true. Wrong in the way that this is not perfect, because we are always missing this and that. And then to for example, take into account all the characteristics of tissue is very difficult or impossible. So if we pursue that and wait until this becomes perfect, then probably this is never realized.
Okay.
So
thank you.
to find out where we can make a good compromise, that's another important thing to do, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yanti. She is a senior lecturer professor here, and her background is actually the medics. So she is actually the completing the part of the practical in hours in engineers. So that's why we the question is also a bit complex, because she knows already about the practical and in the real world how to implement the innovation to the patient. All right, talk we have here tonight. Here tonight, but in yours, maybe it's still in the middle of the day, I guess. So, okay. Is there any still question, or we can conclude today's session? Is there any participants who wants to raise another question? If no, I don't think we have another question, Professor, here. So I think we will conclude today's session with a group photo in our Zoom meeting. So everybody who can open up their camera, please do so we can have...
All right, stop sharing the screen or...
Sure, you can stop sharing the screen, or I can just swipe and there will be the gallery for the people to show up. So it's okay either way. Okay, is there anyone who wants to? Okay, so anyway, I will capture the first slide. So give your best smile. Okay. Some are opening their camera. Okay, do you want to look prettier? Okay, I will wait. All right. Okay, so maybe you guys want to proceed to the UCL. I see there is this, I don't know, is that Manchester United's stadium or Liverpool stadium? I am not sure. But in London, we have a lot of stadium as well. I mean, like we have Arsenal, Chelsea, and
Yes,
some.
there are quite a few, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Manchester is 3 hours away, so it's
Yeah.
not too far away.
Okay, so I will count in 3 and give us your best smile. 1, 2, 3. All right, wait a moment. I will save this. Okay, all done, Professor. Thank you so much for your talk today. It's been an honor to actually reminiscing the day of your lectures back in the days. And I also I hope that this won't be the last of our meeting. I hope that we can further our collaboration, including with the research or any development in our education as well here in Indonesia. So this is from our sincere appreciation for you, Professor, and we will contact you soon with all the further collaboration. Thank you so much, Professor Torii.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, I guess. Good afternoon.
Yeah, very good evening to you all too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Torii.
Thank you.